Zhang Yi didn't have to wait too long, or maybe Zhang Yi was really lucky. In the afternoon, Eagle Eye drove to Tanya's auto repair shop. At first glance, Zhang Yi was attracted by the eagle-eyed appearance. He was an old man with long hair and beard. Although he was old, his muscles were still very good, and his overall body shape was also unusually burly. Don't tell me, my useless ex-husband really sent me the child support. Tanya's tone was calm, neither sad nor happy. It could be seen that she no longer had any feelings for the man in front of her. The spider sense you inherited from your father has finally awakened. Old Barton joked. No, I smelled the smell of alcohol on you from afar. Tanya put down the work at hand, and Ultron 8 next to him couldn't help but add. My scans showed his wallet was dimmer than expected. But old Barton didn't pay attention to Ultron 8, or he simply ignored the robot. Then he walked up to his ex-wife and put a bunch of bundled bills into Tanya's hand. I brought the money I owed, but work didn't go very well. From his face, Tanya could feel the deep guilt and the sadness that had been hidden in her heart. It is precisely because of this that Tanya did not continue to ridicule, but turned around without saying a word and put the money in the drawer and locked it. There were many gangsters around here, and it was necessary not to expose their wealth. After a pause, Tanya spoke. You're not just here to send money. Seriously, what do you want to do here? I just wanted to see my daughter while I... Old Barton opened his mouth, but in the end he said nothing. After all, as the eagle eye back then, as a marksman who always hit the mark with perfect accuracy, it was difficult for old Barton to say that he would soon become blind because of glaucoma. Moreover, he didn't want his ex-wife and daughter to worry. I guess you got into some trouble again. Tanya sighed, then she raised her eyes and said. Before you meet Ashley, you should meet another person. The other person claims to be your friend and is here to wait for you. I asked him to wait for you upstairs. My friend? Old Barton was stunned for a moment, but he quickly became alert, and the guilt in his eyes was instantly taken over by deep hostility. In this broken world, he doesn't have many friends, but no matter who they are, they don't know the relationship between this place and him. So compared to his bold friend, Barton seems more willing to believe that the other party is his bold rival. Has he ever said his name? Old Barton took out a bow and arrow from his satchel. I haven't had time to ask yet. Tanya's face didn't look good when she saw this. But I suggest you go out and fight. The money you gave is not enough to repair this place. Don't worry, madam, we won't fight. At this time, Zhang Yi slowly walked down the stairs. Zhang Yi had discovered Hawkeye when he entered the place, but it was difficult for him to interrupt when he was chatting with his ex-wife about family matters, so he had to wait for an opportunity. In addition, Hawkeye is now older and his mental state is not particularly good. If there is any misunderstanding due to surprise, it will be troublesome. Sure enough, after hearing Zhang Yi's voice, old Barton directly drew his bow and aimed at Zhang Yi's head. Who are you? Boy, I don't remember you as an old friend. Calm down, Barton, I'm just here to talk to you. Zhang Yi raised his hands expressionlessly. What to talk about? Hawkeye did not relax at all. His eyes narrowed slightly, flashing with a dangerous light. At this time, he was like a wounded beast, and he would be violently counterattacked by the slightest provocation. How about talking about that battle in which the criminals were victorious? Before Zhang Yi finished speaking, a flying arrow interrupted his next words. I knew you weren't a good bird. Hawkeye is getting stronger and stronger. He draws the bow and shoots arrows with extremely smooth movements. These coherent movements make people forget that he is already an old man over 50 years old. I knew this old guy had a mental problem. Zhang Yi held up his umbrella and blocked the incoming sharp arrows, while thinking silently in his heart. It is estimated that he regarded himself as the descendant of a certain villain and was preparing to restore the glory of his ancestors, so he came to find the remaining heroes from the past and massacre them in order to show his extraordinary strength, right? After all, this is not a rare thing in the wasteland. Hunter Craven's descendants often do this, and sometimes they even choose some super criminals to hunt. This seems to be their family ritual. While Zhang Yi was thinking, Hawkeye was already close. After he found that his bow and arrow had no effect on this weird umbrella, Barton gave up shooting and turned to close combat. Sure enough, you can't be distracted while fighting. Zhang Yi suddenly pulled out the ink knife from the handle of the umbrella and blocked the alloy composite bow that was struck by Hawkeye. This bow and arrow seemed to be specially made. If an ordinary person were to be hit by this thing, he would probably break a few ribs in an instant. I said, don't fight here. Tanya's angry voice came from not far away. But this still couldn't stop Hawkeye's almost crazy offensive. This old guy had already entered a rhythm. After struggling to block several waves of old Barton's attacks, Zhang Yi also gave up the idea of continuing to fight him in close combat. After all, he had not learned any fighting skills. If it were not for the wizard's powerful mental power and reflexes, he couldn't stop Hawkeye's bout fighting skills at all. Although it is true that Hawkeye is an archer in the Avengers, if anyone really thinks of him as a long-range shooter, it would be a big mistake. In addition to the codename Hawkeye, Barton also has another one named Ronin's code name. Aside from his bow and arrow skills, Hawkeye's close combat skills should not be underestimated. He was trained by an anti-heroic swordsman named the Swordsman. That's enough, Barton, stop, I'm not here to fight with you. Zhang Yi once again narrowly avoided Hawkeye's attack, took several steps back to distance himself, and then spoke calmly. Then you'd better lie down first. But Hawkeye had no intention of stopping at all. He held a bow in one hand and a sharp arrow in the other hand, and once again pounced towards Zhang Yi's position with great ferocity. Seeing this, Zhang Yi directly stretched out his hand. I'm not negotiating with you. Without the help of any spell, the bow and arrow in old Barton's hand suddenly turned into a steel rope and twisted rapidly, as if it came to life. At this time, Barton had no time to react. He was unable to make any effective movements in midair. He was directly tied up by the rope transformed from the weapon in his hand, and the other end was wrapped around the beam, causing him to hang in midair. Are you willing to have a good chat now? Zhang Yi looked at old Barton, who was completely restrained, and said slowly. Although he had already anticipated the situation when he decided to come to Hawkeye, Zhang Yi was still a little helpless when Barton directly attacked him without saying a word. Seriously, Barton, you should really control your temper. Do you think I would still talk to you properly if I wanted to do something to you? It's normal for you not to trust me, but trust me, I really don't want to do anything to you in front of your family. This miserable world has almost driven this old man crazy. Over the years, Eagle Eye has hidden too many things in his heart, but instead of talking to others, he silently said that all the negative energy was buried deep in his heart. He didn't tell his ex-wife and daughter, not even his only friend Logan. He tried to pretend to be a good father in front of his daughter, but in his heart he felt that he was not worthy at all, which also led to his education and doting on Ashley to become like this. He also pretended to be free and easy in front of Wolverine Logan, and tried again and again to get Logan out of the grief of the year. But he knew that his purpose was not to make Logan live a better life, but to enable Logan to stretch out his claws again to avenge those criminals back then. Although he later revealed his heart in front of his successor Kate Bishop and told the truth about that day, it was already too late. This old man who lived for revenge could no longer look back. Nice job, boy. I haven't seen you do this for a few years. Remind me again, who are you? Old Barton tried to resist, but failed. Although Zhang Yi's magic turned the bow and arrow into a soft rope, its material did not change. How could Barton's mortal body break free of the alloy? I haven't introduced myself yet. Zhang Yi rubbed his temples. Forget it, Miss Tanya, Ultron, can you let me and Barton talk alone? Okay, business hasn't been very good lately anyway. Tanya readily agreed, and then she closed the big iron door of the auto repair shop. When she passed Barton, she glared at him fiercely, as if she was blaming him for why Barton wanted to do something here. Afterwards, Tanya and Ultron left one after another, leaving the entire store hall to Zhang Yi and old Barton. They knew that these two people had serious business to talk about, and judging from Zhang Yi's ability, this definitely not the business they wanted to be involved in. Okay, there are only two of us left, boy, please untie me quickly. As soon as Tanya left, old Barton's face changed instantly. Not yet. Why? I already believe you. Old Barton was a little angry. His level had not deteriorated for so many years, but this was the first time in the wasteland that he lost the ability to resist after just one encounter. Some words, it's better to say this. Although you believe me, I don't believe you. Zhang Yi dragged a chair and placed it in front of Eagle Eye, and sat down slowly. Why don't you believe me? I used to be a superhero. Barton argued. Also a supervillain. Zhang Yi's words made old Barton speechless. Okay, sharp-tongued boy, you win, what do you want to know? There's no rush. After hearing this, Zhang Yi did not immediately start the topic. Instead, he slowly shifted his gaze, cast his gaze behind Hawkeye, and spoke displeasedly. I said, let Barton and I talk alone. What? Hawkeye was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately understood what Zhang Yi meant. This sentence was not meant for him. There was someone else hiding behind him, eavesdropping. Who is there? Hawkeye, who had calmed down a little, suddenly became excited. You must know that this is his ex-wife's shop. If any of his enemies eavesdrop here, it may be dangerous to Tanya and Ashley. This kind of result was not what Hawkeye wanted to see, so he struggled hard to see who the person behind him was. The entire auto repair shop hall was quiet, with no movement except for the struggling Hawkeye, and the words Zhang Yi just said did not make any waves, as if they were lost in the sea. And this also made Zhang Yi feel a little unhappy in his heart. He raised his hand and snapped his fingers, and the next second. Clang! In a blind spot on the ceiling, something suddenly fell down and directly hit the auto repair parts below, making a sound of metal collision. I said before, little girl, I have no tolerance for you anymore. The person eavesdropping was none other than Hawkeye's good daughter Ashley. Zhang Yi had already noticed this girl when she sneaked down from the second floor and lay on the ceiling, but he didn't expect that she would be so brave. Ashley? My little princess, is that you? After hearing Zhang Yi's words, old Barton immediately understood the identity of the person behind him. This time, he struggled even more. Don't get me wrong, Ashley, this is Dad's friend. We, are talking about some adult things. You brat, why don't you put me down quickly? Ashley, on the other hand, limped out of the auto repair parts. This was not a light moment, even her unusually ordinary body was a little bit damaged, but she didn't say a word, but fixed her eyes on Zhang Yi. Why, do you want to do it again? Zhang Yi asked flatly. Put me down quickly, Ashley, you should go upstairs and let Dad talk to him, okay? Obedient honey, we have something very important to discuss, go back quickly. Facing Hawkeye's constant words, Ashley turned a deaf ear. In other words, she didn't care at all about what her father said to her. She had completely ignored Eagle Eye. At this moment, she only had Zhang Yi in her eyes. Seeing those admiring eyes mixed with a bit of murderous intent, Zhang Yi remained expressionless for a long time before slowly speaking. You heard what your father said, go upstairs, I won't say it a second time. After the words fell, Ashley on the other side paused for a moment, then turned around and limped up the stairs. Seeing this, Hawkeye also stopped struggling. The atmosphere suddenly became silent, leaving only the sound of Ashley's footsteps walking up the steps step by step. The sound finally stopped at the corner of the second floor and ended with a faint sound of the door closing. After a pause, Hawkeye focused his attention on Zhang Yi again. That girl has never been so obedient. You are quite good at taking care of children. In response, Zhang Yi rolled his eyes speechlessly. There is something wrong with your education. Okay boy, no one will disturb us anymore. Tell me, who are you? Hawkeye changed his friendly demeanor in front of Ashley just now, looked directly at Zhang Yi with a livid face, and asked in a bad tone. My code name is Witch Crow. In front of Hawkeye, Zhang Yi had no intention of hiding it, but he did not reveal the information about Pietro and Carla. To be honest, I come from another universe and ended up here because of an accident. But to be honest, I didn't expect your universe to be so bad, so I need information, all the intelligence in the wasteland. Other universes? Eagle Eye was shocked, and he tried hard to see Zhang Yi clearly. Jesus, can you tell me about that universe? It's very different from our place. It was a very prosperous world. Heroes were still fighting with villains, but it was relatively peaceful. People lived and worked in peace and contentment. In short, everything was business as usual. Zhang Yi would not say that he had just come from a universe where he was almost slaughtered by Deadpool, but would just deal with it casually. But for old Barton, the world Zhang Yi spoke of was the world in his dreams. He had almost forgotten what it was like in peaceful times. For a moment, old Barton had the urge to cry. Sounds great, Hawkeye murmured. It's indeed good. If Hawkeye in that world knew that you married Spider-Man's daughter here, the scene might be even better. Zhang Yi complained flatly, and then changed the topic back. Stop discussing these useless things, it's your turn to talk sir, I need to know everything you know. Sighing faintly, he looked at Zhang Yi with eagle eyes. After a moment, he slowly spoke. It all started 45 years ago. Almost all super criminals, led by the Red Skull, combined to attack the heroes that day. They collected intelligence about all of us and caught us off guard. The villains have won a great victory and divided the whole world. I already know this. The information I want is about how many heroes and how many villains are still alive in the wasteland except you, where they are located, and what weapons they have in their hands, these are what I want. Hearing this, old Barton stopped recalling the painful past. He raised his head in disbelief and looked at Zhang Yi. You, what do you want to do after knowing this? For a moment, Zhang Yi saw a light flashing in old Barton's eyes, which was something called hope. After a pause, Zhang Yi said thoughtfully. For some reasons, I need a lot of energy, and now, basically all the resources in the wasteland are in the hands of those super criminals, so, as you might think, I want to do something like a superhero. Huh, beautiful. Then you really found the right person. Eagle Eye laughed loudly, and at the same time, he looked at Zhang Yi much more eagerly than before. Even if Zhang Yi couldn't read minds, he still knew what Hawkeye was thinking at the moment. It's just that he wants to use his own strength to get revenge. It doesn't matter. If the purpose is the same, Zhang Yi doesn't mind cleaning up some garbage in the wasteland. Anyway, most people here will die without mercy. But Zhang Yi doesn't want to be a gunman for Hawkeye. After experiencing the previous world, Zhang Yi is now extremely wary of these parallel worlds. After all, no one knows what is hidden under this reality. A strange and twisted existence. Don't be too happy, Mr. Barton. With the enemy outnumbered, we need a more careful plan. I have only one purpose, and that is powerful energy. I understand, you guys who play magic are all the same. Back then, Strange also searched for artifacts all over the world. Don't worry, I know it well. Hawkeye smiled. Then you can begin. Zhang Yi raised his hand and made a please gesture. To be honest, as far as I know, almost all the powerful energy was lost in that battle. The villains regarded it as trophies and divided it up. However, some people did have a lot of treasures, such as Red Skull, Dumu. I'm not stupid enough to start a war with the Hydra army and countless Dumbots. Say something useful. After thinking for a moment, Hawkeye spoke again. Well, I believe there are a few candidates that you may be interested in. The first is Count Nephra. I heard that he is still alive. The ion energy in that guy should be helpful to you. There is also the Enchantress. That woman, he is an Asgardian and has an extremely long lifespan. There is also the Red Hood. I heard that the guy found a place to live in seclusion after having a falling out with the Red Skull. In addition, there is the Moonstone. The stone on her body also carries huge energy. For these villains, Eagle Eye dreams every day to crush them to ashes. It is precisely because of this that he is able to keep the information about these villains at his fingertips. Zhang Yi nodded thoughtfully, waved his hand to dispel the magic, put down the eagle eye, and the rope returned to its original appearance. Needless to say, it is a good thing to have a local intelligence source. At least it can save Zhang Yi from making many detours. With the help of an eagle eye, his future actions will be much easier. However, Zhang Yi was not sure how much energy these villains could charge the time controller. However, Zhang Yi guessed that it was far from enough compared to the amount of energy needed to reach the target. You have 2 brushes. Who did you learn this magic skill from? Eagle Eyes asked curiously, rubbing his sore wrist. Do you believe me when I say it's Dracula? Zhang Yi was still thinking about the information just now, so he replied casually. Those villains are very important to me. In this broken place, no one can guarantee which one will come first, the accident or tomorrow, so I have to find them before they die and find a way to absorb the energy from them. I'm telling you, even if you don't want to tell me, don't make such a joke with me. You don't have the stink of a vampire. Eagle Eye really didn't believe Zhang Ye's perfunctory words, but he was in a good mood, so he didn't delve into it. After a pause, Eagle Eye couldn't help but ask. So how do we act next? I can find a way to get the location of all of them. It's not us, it's me. Zhang Yi pointed at himself and said calmly. I have no interest in taking a retired old man to the battlefield. Thank you very much for your information. I will act on my own next. No. Didn't we have a very happy chat just now? When Eagle Eye heard this, he immediately became anxious. He stood directly in front of Zhang Yi and said loudly. Don't underestimate me. I'm not unfamiliar with my kung fu. Have you ever heard of Hawkeye, who can shoot through the heads of those bastards at 100 steps? Even if I'm old, I can still shoot through the heads of those bastards. If you don't believe it, we can compete again. Fight, I won't give in to you this time. In response, Zhang Yi just smiled slightly. Sorry, I'm still not discussing it with you. The next moment, Zhang Yi's body slowly disappeared with the wind without a trace. The entire garage hall suddenly fell silent, leaving only Hawkeye alone and at a loss. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, I have updated it early since the festival today, I wish all book friends happiness and good health. Is that guy gone? The moment Hawkeye opened the door to his daughter's bedroom, Ashley's voice without any affectionate tone rang out. Ah, yes, he left just like that. There might be something urgent, I guess. Old Barton smiled sarcastically. He had just made a fool of himself in front of his daughter, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. He was even more worried about his daughter. We'll underestimate him because of this. He's not your friend, right? Ashley asked calmly. It's hard to judge, let's just dash. If you're going to lie to me, then we won't have anything to say. Before old Barton could finish speaking, Ashley interrupted him. She withdrew her gaze, and then waved her arm lightly. The next moment, the dart in her hand was nailed to the poster on the wall. That was a poster of Hawkeye when he was young. There are some things that Hawkeye can't tell outsiders, as it will only bring them countless dangers. With such a daughter, old Barton naturally won't explain the specific situation to her. But at the same time, Barton didn't want to cause a rift in the relationship between himself and his daughter, so for a while, Barton was a little entangled. Is there anything else? Looking out the window, Ashley asked again without looking back. I heard you had a fight. Old Barton said dryly. He had never thought that he had faced so many world-ending crises, but there had never been a situation that made him as anxious as he was now. Yes, a group of thugs bullied a fat man, so I went over dash. An act of justice, that's great. Hawkeye said with a smile, but he was obviously happy too early. I went over and beat them all up. I protected that damn fat guy, but he actually didn't want to pay. This was an insult to me. Ashley's expression was cold, as if she was recounting a sparse incident. Ordinary things. Okay. That's a little less awesome. Eagle Eye sighed. He wanted to say something to educate his daughter who was a little off track, but when he opened his mouth, he couldn't say anything, because in this twisted world, I am not qualified to evaluate Ashley's actions at all. Because for the vast majority of people in the wasteland, Ashley's actions and principles are correct. People who do not serve themselves will be punished by heaven and earth. Hawkeye's approach has long been outdated. So what are you here to do? Ashley had no patience to continue the conversation. That I'm going somewhere and doing something important. God knows how determined old Barton was when he said these words. He let out a heavy breath. You may never see me again. Are you going with that wizard? Ashley suddenly turned her head. Although old Barton's eyesight was not very good, he could still see clearly. At this time, Ashley was facing the person codenamed Witch Crow, very interested. Old Barton didn't know whether this was a good thing or something. He believed that Witch Crow might be a superhero, because in him, Eagle Eye felt a completely different outlook and code of conduct from the world. This was something that ordinary people could not do anyway. Imitate it. Only by truly living in a world of law, peace, and justice can one develop such a worldview. And judging from the other party's age, it is obvious that the Witch Crow cannot be a native of the wasteland. Therefore, Hawkeye is more willing to believe that he does come from a parallel world. Anyway, this kind of thing is not unusual given his shocking experiences in his early years. But precisely because of this, Hawkeye is even more worried. He doesn't want his daughter to get involved in danger out of curiosity. Maybe old Barton is not a good father. He has money to buy game consoles for Wolverine's children and is unwilling to use the money to make up for child support, but his love and guilt for Ashley will not be fake. Sighing, old Barton said slowly. No, our goals are the same. Maybe we will act together in the future, if I can come back alive, but before that, I have some personal things to do, so I can only go. I came here just to see you, Ashley. Oh, you saw me, now you can go. Ashley's tone was still without any emotion, as cold and biting as the cold wind in the winter moon, as if to her, Eagle Eye was not her relative at all, not even as good as a passerby. There was a long silence, and finally, Hawkeye left. He didn't know what he should say. Maybe he took the wrong path from the beginning. If it weren't for him, Ashley wouldn't be like this. This is all his responsibility. Walking out of Tanya's auto repair shop, the eagle-eyed figure looked extremely desolate in the wind. He leaned on his car silently, and his mind began to think about the Witch Crow. He was not sure whether Witch Crow would act according to the intelligence he gave. Originally, according to his idea, he was going to act together with the other party to fight evil in the wasteland, avenge those authoritarian supervillains, and become a true the Avengers. But unfortunately, that brat just left him behind. Am I really old? Eagle Eye's vision was a little blurry. He didn't know how much time his eyes could give him, but what he knew was that if he wanted revenge, now was his only chance. Old Barton became extremely angry when he thought of the expression on that stinky boy from Wuya before he disappeared. He wiped his vicissitudes of face to cheer himself up. The next moment, he turned around, opened the car door and sat in. If you don't want to take me with you, you will regret it. Driving out of Hammerfell City, Hawkeye changed from his previous decadence. The target of his trip was the culprit who had never had a good night's sleep in so many years, the Thunder Agents. When Magneto and the Absorbing Man ruined the last hope of the Avengers, the remaining troops led by Hawkeye were not without the strength to fight. Even if they couldn't fight hard, they could still cover their retreat. But at this time, the Thunder Agents, who were close to the Hawkeye team and had cooperated countless times, rebelled. They ruthlessly attacked their comrades who had given their backs to them. With the Thunder Agents defecting before the battle, the Avengers no longer had any room to speak of, leaving only those who were deliberately let go by the villains. Hawkeye survives to this day. Those traitors who hurt him, Hawkeye would never dream of killing them with his own hands. To do this, he had to find a way to get the specific reports and locations of those guys. Fortunately, old Barton's years in the wasteland were not in vain. He happened to know a place that might be able to meet his requirements. So, he drove to a small town outside Hammerfell City and walked into a nightclub called Dazzling. As soon as I walked in, dynamic and noisy music hit me. Welcome, sir. Do you need anything? The enthusiastic waiter said so. I'm here to find someone. Hawkeye glanced at the waiter. There was no special move, but the hand holding the bow and arrow under his robe tightened. As far as he knew, this was the territory of the Eyeball Man. This villain was not very powerful, not even as strong as some ordinary people, but his sins were no less than those of other villains. In that battle that year, if the Eyeball Man hadn't used the eye of the observer to see the weaknesses of most superheroes, they wouldn't have been defeated so miserably. Therefore, maybe the Eyeball Man didn't participate in the battle, but for this sin, you can't escape it no matter what. After the decisive night, Eyeball Man was not secretly executed by the Red Skull like Mysterio. On the contrary, he was highly praised by most villains. The Red Skull even specially approved a large sum of money for him. If you wish, you can create your own power in this wasteland. Also, because of the special ability of this eyeball man, old Barton believed that he could find information about the members of the Thunder Agents here. If it had been before, then Hawkeye would never have come here anyway, because when he came forward, it meant that his identity was exposed. The Red Skull would not allow an Avenger to survive in his territory. What awaits Hawkeye will be an endless pursuit. But it doesn't matter. At this time, Eagle Eye has already ignored his own life and death. An old man who is about to become blind due to glaucoma is no different from death to Hawkeye. In the bar, the dynamic music and the sexy dancing girls beat the hearts of the guests, but Eagle Eye turned a blind eye and turned a deaf ear to this. Soon, he saw the target of his trip in the corner of the dance floor. With just one glance, old Barton recognized the other party's identity. That was the eyeball man. There is no way, the appearance of the big eyeball on the neck is too conspicuous. Let alone the eagle eye, it is difficult for ordinary people not to notice this deformed guy. Under the dim light, eyeball man hugged him from left to right and swayed his body gently. Beside him, several girls in sexy superhero uniforms were holding colorful cocktails to accompany the local gangster. Boss. Eagle Eye walked slowly towards the direction of eyeball man. The pungent smell of alcohol made him feel a little uncomfortable. He hadn't drank alcohol for a long time. Perhaps life is like wine, sometimes you are drunk and sometimes you are sober, but for an eagle eye, only you know whether you are drunk or not and others cannot notice whether you are sober or not. Arriving in front of the eyeball man, Eagle Eyes looked down at the eyeball man sitting in front of him. It's time for them to leave, my friend, I'll take care of today's venue. Hawkeye's words were very soft, but his tone was very unquestionable. Hearing the noise, eyeball man slowly raised his head, and when he saw old Barton's face, eyeball man's expression became ferocious at a speed visible to the naked eye. Old Barton was well prepared. He knew that his identity could not be hidden in front of the eyeball people, so he had no intention of hiding it from the beginning to the end. He slowly raised his arm, and an extremely sharp arrow shone coldly under the light. If you scream, then the next moment, this thing will pierce your head. If you don't believe it, you can try it and see who is faster. I believe it, I believe it. Before Hawkeye could say anything more, Eyeball Man immediately spoke. No one knows Hawkeye's glorious record better than him. Being able to serve as the leader of the West Coast Avengers among a group of superpowers, there is no doubt about Hawkeye's power. This is best. So what are you waiting for? Old Barton stared at the person with cold eyes. It's over. The next second, the Eyeball Man jumped up from his seat. He waved his hands to drive away the girls around him, and at the same time, he shouted loudly at his men. That's it for today, friends, let's go. Everyone, get out of here. But. The boss has spoken. Music stopped. Clear the place, guys. A drunk mercenary guest wanted to say something, but he was quickly pushed out by a few strong men. The girls and others also left the venue obediently. After all, this place was established by the Eyeball people. Here, all the rules are decided by others. Since the Eyeball people have spoken, they will naturally not have any complaints. Here, class is everything. As the boss of all of them, his orders are the law of heaven and cannot be refused. Eagle Eyes watched this scene indifferently, and he was slightly relieved when he saw that the guys had left. Originally, he thought there would be a fierce battle to be fought here. God, I really don't know what happened back then, and I don't know how you ended up like this. The Eyeball Man raised his hands and took a few steps back with fear on his face, as if this could give him some sense of security. After all, Hawkeye's current state was too scary. Stop talking nonsense, Eyeball, I don't need your pity, I just need to know where they are. Hawkeye pushed the Eyeball Man down on the chair, stared hard, and said in a low voice. You know who I mean by them. I know. Calm down, okay? I'm just a minor character. Eyeball Man was terrified, but he didn't dare to resist at all. Hearing this, old Barton snorted coldly and paused. Then he looked at the eyeball person with disgust and said word by word. Then you'd better tell me quickly, I can spare your life for this. Don't try to lie to me, I have nothing to lose. There's one, Goliath, and I know where he's going. Eyeball Man racked his brains and seemed to be seriously thinking about the intelligence of those guys. Of course he knew who they that Hawkeye was talking about could bring Hawkeye to this level. Baron Zemo and the Thunder agents he created would have to bear primary responsibility. Atlas? Old Barton raised his eyebrows, and then motioned for him to continue. He works at an amusement park in Arcade. I have a club there. He goes there to spend money every day. He often complains that he still has to work in the circus after having made such great achievements back then. The Eyeball Man paused and added unintentionally. But it's 100 times better than turning screws in a factory, isn't it? Old Barton was silent, seeming to be digesting the information. That's all I know, sir. The Eyeball Man swallowed hard, fearing that Hawkeye would regret it and shoot him with an arrow. Hearing this, Eagle Eye narrowed his eyes slightly. After hesitating for a while, he let go of the hand holding the arrow, stood up, picked up a glass of wine on the table and drank it down. Here's the drink money for you. After leaving a piece of steel behind, Eagle Eye strode out of the nightclub, watching Hawkeye's leaving figure through the crack in the window. It wasn't until Hawkeye's figure disappeared at the end of the street that everyone withdrew their gaze. Isn't it a little cruel to him if we do this? Kara asked slowly. P.S. The day after tomorrow, there will be a Chidian app recommendation, and the creation book will be recommended on Chidian. This is my first time. Of course, this is all your credit. Without your support, I would not have the motivation to write a book. What's more, the results will not get better and better, thank you all. In this wasteland shrouded in yellow sand, all civilizations have almost regressed to the dark age of chaos and disorder. When hope is extinguished by despair, and gangs and monsters take advantage of the sudden rise of the chaos to dominate the mountains, burning, killing and looting, the lives of countless ordinary people no longer belong to them. The weak only deserve to sink in endless sorrow and become people are not like humans, and ghosts are not like ghosts. The leaving figure of Eagle Eye was so desolate. Although he had tried his best to stand upright and tried to regain his courage to move forward, everyone knew that this was a rugged and difficult road of no return. He just disappeared so lonely at the end of the road, pursuing the little spark of hope that he firmly believed in his heart and still existed but was lost in history. Is it cruel? Zhang Yi took a deep breath and then let it out slowly. Maybe. Carla and Pietro withdrew their gaze and turned their attention to Zhang Yi. They knew that Zhang Yi had not finished speaking yet. Everyone wants to be protected by the shade of a tree, but there must always be someone standing in the sun. This is his battle. It is a battle that started 45 years ago. This battle is not over yet. It has been 45 years in the making and I believe he will succeed. What if he fails? Pietro looked a little heavy. He didn't think that a 70-year-old man could face criminals that ordinary people couldn't deal with. To him, this was no different from sending death. He will succeed. Zhang Yi said calmly but firmly. But he failed back then. Kara frowned, the worry evident in her brows. But it doesn't mean that he will fail this time. Zhang Yi replied. So. Kara pondered for a moment, her brows slowly unfurling. We'll help him, right? Yes, but not now. Zhang Yi said seriously. I left something on him that will keep him safe, but that's all. We have more important things to do. Zhang Yi could see the worry and urgency of Carla and Pietro. They also wanted to contribute. They also wanted to kill all the evil in the world like old Barton. This may be related to their experience and age. Teenagers and girls always want to use their own ideas to reshape the world, but this is far from as simple as imagined. If the ruined universe where Pietro was born represents the madness and distortion before the nuclear war, then this wasteland universe represents the destruction of civilization and moral collapse after the nuclear war. In this world, barbarism and violence grow wantonly and have become the main colors of the world. Countless sins are hidden in the endless deserts and ruins. This can never be solved by using violence to fight violence or killing with revenge. Matter. It's easy to destroy a castle, but it's much harder to rebuild it, something that may take many like-minded people, or even generations, to accomplish. But there are only two kinds of people left here, one is the survivor and the other is the desperado. There are still some remaining superheroes like Hawkeye in this world, but most of them are no longer in the public eye. Perhaps it is because they also know that they can no longer compete with this world with their own strength. Are you contending? Since the night when the super criminals triumphed, the entire world order has been destroyed. The Red Skull and other villains have divided the world and tried to use their own ideas to establish a new regime model. But visible to the naked eye, they failed. These guys who are full of evil in their bones are addicted to the enjoyment of victory. They never understand what the rule of law is, let alone the meaning of the existence of this society. They only know one thing, that is, on their territory, only they have the final say. It is impossible for a group of guys who regard criminal law as their job resume to build a new society. The more inferior a person is in his bones, the more he wants others to bow down to him, and the more he wants to see others lose everything and lose their glory. The more flattering a person is to the strong, the more cruel and abnormal he will be to the weak. They are patients, a bunch of sane lunatics. Originally they were under the supervision of superheroes, but now it's different. The Red Skull infested the land and divided up all the territories to be ruled by the criminals he attracted, but he obviously misjudged these allies. Although he is the nominal leader, he can no longer control the land in the hands of others. The Hulk took away his cousin She-Hulk and used her as a fertility machine, because in this world, only people with the same abilities as him can leave the blood of the Hulk, and at the same time, because only She-Hulk's tough body can withstand his force. Today, the Hulk gang has become the largest gang on the West Coast. Their territory is desolate and barren but has a large number of poor people. Those guys with the blood of the Hulk never regard humans as compatriots. In the minds of these guys who are closely related to each other, humans are just the same food as animals. In the territory of the original Magneto, the second-generation Kingpin rose up. He poisoned Magneto, who was half-stepping into the coffin. At the same time, he also led countless thugs under him to brutally slaughter the mutants under Magneto. As for those who were captured alive were thrown into the Colosseum for fun. These were only what Zhang Yi saw from the broken soul fragments of the Eyeball Man when he killed him. As for other places, Zhang Yi couldn't even imagine the living situation of ordinary people. Even the business chains established by the Eyeball people are all established for those big and small gangs. No matter how hard the lives of ordinary people are, or whether they can survive until the next dawn, here. In the nightclub of Eyeball Man, the lights are always bright. The era that was originally lacking in supplies gradually became more rotten and fester in the hands of this group of criminals who were obsessed with the joy of victory and only cared about pleasure. When more and more people discover that if they want to survive, they must rob others of their resources, everything is out of control. The Red Skull can no longer actually rule this world because it has become a living hell. If you can't live without robbing others, and even if you don't robbing others, others will come to robbing you, then this means that civilization has fallen into degeneration. Various gangs have sprung up like mushrooms after a spring rain. They commit murder and arson, and exploit the poor people at the bottom. Ordinary people even have to accept the oppression of several gangs, and even die in their own homes without explanation. Everything has changed. It got worse.